Hello. When Anakin confronted Sidious, he decided to turn him over to the Jedi Council. What if Anakin Skywalker fought Darth Sidious? Would he be able to defeat the Sith Lord, or would he fall victim to him? Would this action set off a complete different chain of events? Special thanks to Lightsabers for sponsoring our 75,000 subscriber lightsaber giveaway. All the details in the pinned comment down below. We are so very close to hitting that marker. Also, special thanks to the Star Wars Galaxies for joining us on this epic collaboration. All of his information is in the description.
Our story begins inside of the Republic Executive Building on Coruscant. Anakin had just been sent to inform the Supreme Chancellor that Obi-Wan Kenobi had engaged General Grievous on the planet of Utapau. Anakin was very unmotivated at the moment. There were a ton of stresses sitting in his mind, the first of which living in the present moment. His wife Padme was pregnant. For the previous few days, Anakin had been having nightmares about her death. On top of that, Anakin felt resentment for the High Council, because amid Palpatine's appointment of him to the High Council, he was neglected the role of Jedi Master. It was also something that restricted him from assisting his master on Utapau. Of course, there was too Ahsoka on the planet of Mandalore facing off against former Sith assassin Darth Maul. Skywalker's heartstrings tore at him, and so he was left to be here, as his duty demanded of him. He was requested by Obi-Wan Kenobi on behalf of the Council to spy on the Chancellor. It's not something that he readily accepted either. Regardless, as the news came in that Kenobi was engaging General Grievous, he was sent to the Republic Executive Building by Master of the Order Mace Windu, who was eager to know how the Chancellor would respond to such developments. When Anakin arrived, he immediately informed Palpatine of the encounter, and being a longtime friend of Anakin's, the elder politician asked Anakin what was wrong. Of course, Anakin's perspective seemed like a normal conversation. Obviously, Palpatine would notice a discouraged look on Anakin's face. Nothing was at all ominous about it. Palpatine, of course, was the Sith Lord, but Anakin was not aware of that for now. As the two old friends walked around the room, Palpatine became more and more ominous in his vocabulary choices. He said things that made Anakin question his intentions, and for good reason. When Palpatine brought up the usage of the dark side of the Force, and having learned it, everything clicked. Anakin ignited his weapon. He had rage seething through his soul. He looked over at a man who he had befriended from a young age. Palpatine teased Skywalker with the idea of being able to save his wife from certain death. Anakin wasn't very pleased, and he pointed his lightsaber at the elder Sith Lord. But Sidious didn't fear this. He welcomed it. He told Skywalker that he could feel his anger and his rage. That's exactly what Palpatine wanted. Even if Skywalker struck him down, then he would be victorious at the end of the day. Anakin gripped his blade, a million thoughts running through his mind as he held it in his hand. He thought about the great enjoyment he would have from thrusting it through Palpatine's back. The idea of threatening Anakin's wife sent him over the edge. It was bad enough with Rush Clovis. Anakin could only imagine what he would do to a man who threatened her life. Well, the opportunity sat in front of him, his metal hand gripping the lightsaber tighter, and then Palpatine spoke, methodically, almost in a hypnotizing way. Anakin steadied himself and lowered his weapon. Palpatine turned around and looked at Anakin with a sinister grin, and in that moment, Anakin raged forward, swinging his blade above his head and trying to strike Palpatine down. The Dark Lord of the Sith bounced under the swing and ignited his own weapon, with a hiss under his breath. Skywalker turned around and the two of them began a quick duel, beating their blades back against the others. Sidious was the more skilled opponent, having mastered all 7 forms of lightsaber combat and existing as a sole avatar of darkness in the galaxy. Anakin was a long ways away from being a natural challenge to someone as powerful as Sidious, but he killed Dooku days before. Surely he could do the same here. In his mind, Sidious was a weak old man, and Skywalker was going to make him pay. Sidious parried another couple strikes before Anakin's attacks got stronger and more aggressive, cutting through panels on the walls and forcing Palpatine into the adjacent room. The Dark Lord used the Force to close the doors behind Skywalker to ensure that their battle didn't capture the attention of the Senate guards. Sidious had no intention of killing Skywalker. All he wanted to do was break him, bring him down into the depths of failure and despair, and then he could truly corrupt him. Anakin's swings got heavier and heavier, cutting through Palpatine's chair. Sidious grinned, using the Force to shatter the window next to him. Anakin swung his lightsaber as Palpatine darted out of the window. Anakin ran to the edge of the room and looked down, but Sidious had vanished. His mind was now at conflict. He wanted to ensure Palpatine died, but at the same time, this would be the perfect time to inform the Council of everything that just happened. Windu surely had more jurisdiction than he did, and he might have the proper means to secure, capture, or kill Palpatine. As far as Anakin was aware, Sidious was somewhere on Coruscant, so Skywalker turned around and called into his comlink, telling Mace Windu to get to the Republic Executive Building as fast as humanly possible. Anakin tried his best to piece everything together. making sure that no one could enter the office until the Jedi got there. And in that moment, Skywalker pulled up the holo recordings on the security system in Palpatine's office, so that he could show proof of Palpatine being the Sith Lord for Mace. In his urgency, Anakin completely forgot about the conversation leading up to it. There were several thoughts on his mind, the first of them making sure that Palpatine was adequately dealt with. At least for the time being, Anakin hoped that Windu would promote him to the rank of Jedi Master, so that he could get the information he required inside the Jedi archives. When Mace Windu arrived, he found a bent-out-of-shape Anakin. He could feel the stress emanating off of Skywalker the moment he entered the building, which only led the 4 Jedi Masters to enter the room a little bit faster. When they got to the Chancellor's office, Anakin informed them that he had information they needed, and he played back the holo recordings. The moment they started, a chill shot down Anakin's spine. He knew he messed up, but he couldn't cover up his tracks now. Palpatine began telling Skywalker that the Jedi didn't trust him, pushing him further and further away from the Order itself. Windu was already aware of this, and it brought him a genuine sense of rage, but then Sidious alluded to the dark side, begging Skywalker to use his knowledge. It would help him save his wife from certain death. And the Jedi watched Anakin ignite his weapon and hold it to Palpatine's face. They could all see the sense of pride that Palpatine could feel in the moment. He was a true Sith Lord. No ordinary man would have such pride in their actions. The Jedi looked at each other, but Mace didn't move. There were several emotions flowing through him, and not even Anakin could figure out what they were. He could very easily tell that Sidious was twisting a dagger into Skywalker's chest. While the alarming notion of a wife was something Mace could deal with later, seeing firsthand why Skywalker was so quick to distrust the Jedi all made sense. The eloquence and the hypnotic means to which Palpatine spoke was alluring even to him. It was believable. Every word that came out of his mouth was like an enchanted spell, determined to change the fate of the galaxy. Palpatine's pride was met with incredible speed when Skywalker attacked. The ignition of a crimson blade only confirmed their worst fears. Windu obviously had to deal with this issue, but right now, that was the least of his concerns. Windu turned on his communicator and sent a message to the Jedi Battle Master and told Sindralic to lock down the Jedi Temple. The Jedi all looked at the Master of the Order. He was in charge. He was built for this moment. Without knowing where Sidious was, the Jedi needed to act fast and quickly. After locking down the Jedi Temple, Windu used his quick thinking and his intellect, telling Commander Fox to lock down the Republic Executive Building and the Senate Building. No one was to leave or enter. When asking for what directive this was for, Mace told Fox that the Chancellor had been kidnapped and the Jedi were securing the premises. Windu turned around and told Anakin that he did well. They would have to move quickly if the Jedi Order was to survive. Anakin wasn't sure what this meant or what they were going to do, so he asked. Mace told Skywalker that he would have to trust him, as the Council had trusted Anakin. His actions likely saved the galaxy from carnage, but they needed to act fast. Windu dispatched Agan Kolar and Saesee Tiin to the Senate building to see if they could find or secure everything. As he did, he requested Shak Ti and Coleman Kaj to also go to the Senate building, being that both of them were also on Coruscant anyways. Windu didn't want Skywalker leaving his sight, especially considering there was now an attachment for Anakin that could greatly contribute to him turning to the dark side. Windu knew he couldn't let Anakin out of his sight. Sidious was clearly a master manipulator, and if he got Skywalker alone, then it could sow his fall to the dark side. Hours would pass by. There would be no sight of Sidious, no sign anywhere. There was some awkward tension for both Anakin and Mace. Obviously, Anakin knew he was likely in trouble for having a wife, believing that he would be expelled by the Jedi Order. Windu, on the other hand, was trying to manage how he would handle this predicament. He at this point had figured out who it was, and it was really blatantly obvious. Like, Anakin didn't even try to hide it. Regardless, during their time, Windu would have a small call with the Grand Master to get his own input on the situation. The response would genuinely surprise Windu, but even Yoda, having seen the clip of Palpatine's manipulation, knew what needed to be done. As Republic troops, Senate guards, and Coruscant police began scouring the city, looking for the kidnapped Chancellor, Mace Windu brought Anakin Skywalker back to the Jedi Temple and to the Council chambers. Anakin, assuming, again, that he was in trouble, waited for a blasting, but as they arrived, Grandmaster Yoda was sitting in his seat, a hologram of course, waiting for Skywalker to show up. Windu stood next to Anakin and then stepped back as Master Yoda told Anakin to kneel. Anakin got to his knee and put his head down. Yoda ignited his lightsaber over the hologram and told Anakin that while it wasn't typical for one to achieve such status without having trained a Jedi Knight, his actions in the recent 48 hours only showed how deserving of the role he truly was. Windu looked on proudly. While he and a number of other council members originally feared the idea of bringing him on along, he had to admit he was proud of Anakin's resilience at his most desperate hour. Anakin could have very easily been led astray from the Jedi Order, and with Mace having seen the recordings themselves, and had time to internalize what it was that he saw, he knew how close Anakin was to becoming an agent of evil. Windu had originally suggested to Yoda they make Skywalker a master, and now it was fulfilled. Yoda ignited his lightsaber over the hologram, and Anakin watched the blue lightsaber glide above his shoulders and then de-ignite into Yoda's belt. It was funny. Yoda's blade was green, but you couldn't tell with the hologram. As Yoda finished, Windu ignited his own lightsaber and did the same process, afterwards telling Anakin that he believed Skywalker should be able to enjoy the moment for what it was. With Anakin now a Jedi Master, Yoda would tell the two of them to go to the industrial sector. He recalled a vision that he had a few months before, and he discovered the Sith Lord there, inside the vision of course. The two Jedi bowed and left for the industrial sector. There was a certain plan the Council had at play here. Their intention was to ensure Anakin was on their side. That was their main concern. Palpatine was twisting a dagger, and the Jedi had to untwist it. After this ordeal was over, they could confront the notion of Anakin having a wife. Right now, that wasn't their issue, and it wasn't a big deal because the fate of the galaxy didn't rest on it. The two Jedi followed Yoda's instructions and found themselves at an old abandoned building. When they landed, it was eerie. Windu put his hand out in front of Skywalker and stepped forward. Anakin interpreted it as Windu trying to seize the glory. However, Windu was in all actuality trying to keep Anakin safe. The two of them walked forward. Windu held his lightsaber in his hand without having ignited it, and the two of them turned the corner. Anakin saw a small table and asked what it was. Windu told Skywalker that it was a Sith altar, likely used for alchemy of sorts. The two of them walked forward and spread out around the altar. Windu warned Anakin from touching it, expressing that it could have really negative effects on him and the Force that revolved around him. The Jedi were unfamiliar with this at this point in their history, and so they kept their distance. As they did, a hologram appeared. It was Darth Sidious. He smiled. He was wearing his robes and he spoke delicately with a sinister grin, telling them that he was proud they were able to, after all these years, find his lair. The Jedi looked at each other, both of them ignited their lightsabers, demanding to know where he was. Sidious just smiled and told them that all he wanted them to do was discover his lair. It had been waiting for them, but now their fate had been sealed. Sidious turned to Skywalker and told him that he offered him his hand once, and for his negligence, there'd be some extra motivation for him to join the dark side. Padme was dragged onto the hologram. As Sidious cackled, she looked so off, her face was pale and under her eyes were bags. The life in her eyes were gone. Anakin cried out her name, but all she did was look up, almost as if she had her tongue cut out, and within a moment, Sidious ignited his lightsaber and shoved it through her back. Anakin deignited his weapon and rage seethed out of his being. His entire body raged with the Force, and he yelled out at Palpatine, telling him that he would pay for that, as every object in the room was lifted off the ground. Of course, Sidious wanted Anakin in this room. The dark side would surround him, and it was breaking into him. Skywalker lifted his hands, and Windu was lifted off of the ground too, but not just Windu, Sidious too. Skywalker began choking Sidious until the transmission was cut off. Mace yelled out Anakin's name, demanding that he release him, and moments passed by, each second feeling like an eternity, and then Skywalker released him. As he did, every dark side artifact in the room fell to the ground. Anakin fell to his knees, short on his breath. The dark side corrupted him, and it overtook his entire body. He was defenseless against it. With the shock of seeing Padme die, he couldn't resist the urge. Each and every artifact called out to him. Windu rubbed his head and looked over at Anakin, seeing his head buried into his hands. Windu's first fear was that Anakin was struggling with the dark side. Even he knew that that reaction was inspired by the dark artifacts in the room, but he didn't want to play the game with Anakin, especially if he had been corrupted by the dark side. Mace cautiously approached Anakin and asked if he was alright. When Anakin looked up from out of his hands, he wiped tears away from his face. Windu reached out his hand to Anakin. He didn't know how to communicate on the level that Anakin needed, but he did as best as he could, telling Skywalker that they would find Sidious, they would defeat him, but they would have to do it together, as long as Skywalker trusted Windu. Anakin looked at the Master of the Order's eyes and nodded his head. He couldn't deny the sense of camaraderie that was making him feel a little bit better, but in Anakin's mind he told himself that when he found Sidious he would gut him like a rat. In the coming hours, Ahsoka would return from her mission to Mandalore with Darth Maul in custody. She would hand Maul over to the Republic authorities. After all, now that Mandalore was invaded by the Republic, Maul was officially a Republic issue. Mace requested that Anakin stay inside the Jedi Temple while he and the other council members handle the situation involving the Chancellor, even suggesting that Anakin get rest, as difficult as that could be. Anakin appreciated the sincerity. He was genuinely surprised, but when he got back to the temple for rest, he was left with daunting nightmares. He was stuck with them from the moment he went to sleep. The same ones that he was having, but they were amplified, filled with the memories of what he saw in Sidious's lair. With this new information revealed, more Jedi were ferrying themselves back to the temple. The Clone Wars looked to be at an end, but Yoda wanted Skywalker to be surrounded by allies. He was informed of Padme's situation, and Yoda believed, especially at this moment, it was crucial for the Jedi to be supportive of Skywalker. While they couldn't outright be supportive of the marriage, they had no choice but to choose Skywalker right now. They couldn't allow Sidious to get through to him and turn him to the dark side of the Force. Currently, Yoda and Ahsoka were in the garden with each other. They were having a conversation. Yoda was waiting for Anakin, and so was Ahsoka. Both of them went to the garden to meditate, and they happened upon each other. Their conversation revolved around Ahsoka's choice, and Yoda actually understood it. However, he tried to ask if Ahsoka would rejoin the Order not for herself but for her former master. She denied, but expressed that she would stay close to him, especially after learning about the incident that occurred several hours beforehand. While they were talking, Anakin came up the steps to the garden. He was redirected there by a number of temple guards who were stationed outside of his room to ensure his safety. Anakin didn't necessarily mind it, but he found it weird how cautious the Jedi were becoming all of a sudden with him. Regardless, Anakin was surprised to see both Yoda and Ahsoka in the garden talking to each other. He stood on the other side of the garden, and Yoda motioned him over. A small smile crossed Anakin's face as he got closer to them. Ahsoka popped up and gave Anakin a big hug, apologizing for what had just happened before she arrived. Anakin simply nodded his head. Yoda, on the other hand, had Skywalker sit down. Anakin got down next to Master Yoda, and Ahsoka flanked him by sitting down on the other side of her master. He told Anakin that he wanted him to feel secure here at the temple, to know that the Order had always stood beside him. Maybe there were problems with communication in a way that Anakin needed, but they didn't want him to feel like they would abandon him. It was almost the most sincere thing the Jedi could say, and even in his bare bones, Anakin did appreciate the effort more than anything. He looked at Yoda with a weak smile. For a moment, he felt the embrace of the Jedi Order. A door opened and Anakin looked behind him. With the war seemingly over, the council returned in its full strength. Yoda smiled at Anakin as the council moved around Anakin, and Yoda simply asked Anakin to close his eyes. Jedi Master after Jedi Master descended to Anakin, each of them putting their hand on him and kneeling beside him or putting their hand on the Jedi in front of them. It wasn't just an act of solitude. The council was repairing the wound in Anakin's heart. It wasn't a forced heal by any means, just another long-lost ability that was stuck within the shelves of the restricted section. Of course, it wouldn't completely heal what had been lost, but it would ensure that Anakin knew he wasn't alone. The closest Jedi to him during this process was Ahsoka to his right, Yoda to his left, and Obi-Wan hovering right behind him with Plo Koon just beside Kenobi. This moment of pure beauty wouldn't last forever. The Jedi, having assumed they won the war, would be completely wrong. The CIS would have a show of incredible power, and without Dooku or Grievous, it appeared the droid armies increased tenfold. It was terrible. The clones and the Jedi were once again outnumbered, and it was all a selective calculation made by Palpatine, seemingly. His armies had always outnumbered the clones, and the armies held in reserve were left there because he was going to take over the Republic. Another plan must have been currently unfolding in his evil mind. Everything the Republic strived for in 3 years was rescinded within months. The Outer Rim sieges were a dream of the sweet taste of victory that could never be satisfied. When the droid forces began pushing back, more Jedi died. This would be seen in the more talented masters and knights alike. It was a terrible war. It was a terrible fall from what had been so close to victory. Inside of the Republic, Bail Organa would be placed at the helm, but all chances for anything related to peace were cut out from nowhere to the Separatist government. Did they die? Were they being locked up? Or simply did they have no interest in restoring peace? No one knew. During the war, Master Skywalker would be ushered back to Coruscant after a terrible loss over the planet of Kuat. The 501st may have been elite, but even they were losing. It just went to show the lengths of which Palpatine and his droid armies were coming back with. While the battle was hard fought, the Republic would hold its last stand over Coruscant. The worst part about the loss at Kuat was it included a terrible loss of the Republic Star Destroyers that were nearly finished. Regardless, when Skywalker returned to Coruscant, he learned of Darth Maul's escape. The Sith acolyte, former student to Darth Sidious, was freed, and what could that all mean? What was Sidious planning to do with Maul? There was no time to think about Maul, especially when the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen showed up at Coruscant. It was again awful. While Anakin may have been in check with his emotions over the past several months and finally making a recovery mentally, all the war losses were leaving a toll on his mind. He was fortunate enough to still have Commander Rex, but Appa was cut down during the siege of Anaxes, and several more clones were lost elsewhere, one of them being Jesse. The war didn't just have negative effects on the Jedi, who were losing many battles, but it also did the clones. Kamino was overtaken a month prior to the assault on Coruscant, and it left a disgusting taste in the mouths of all the clones. They fought harder with revenge on their minds, but it only led them to more defeats. The final stand at Coruscant would have the current Chancellor Bail Organa trying his hardest to stop the war, but it proved to no avail. The Republic fleet was destroyed within hours, few survivors escaping, the rest being ripped apart or executed with no sign of mercy. Of course, in command of the CIS fleet was a super tactical droid, and as if things couldn't get worse, the clones and the Jedi protected the ground until a voice breached the Republic military frequency. Turns out Bail never thought to remove Palpatine's code into the system, and he sent out an order before his droids landed on the surface. Execute Order 66. As the droids descended into the capital of the galaxy, the clones turned on their Jedi commanders point without a hint as to why, and the Jedi were slaughtered. A lot of the Jedi were situated in the temple, and on the steps there were thousands of clones as well. The silence in the halls of the temple were filled with blaster fire. Of course, with surviving council members present, everything would go right. It turned out to be a falsehood. The Senate building was bombarded, and the droids, under directive of Palpatine, hovered over the temple. The clones were talented enough to break in, especially with members of the 501st and 212th present. It was almost a cakewalk for some of the Galaxy's best men. On the interior, the council was defending the running away members of the Order. They were being fed out the back side of the temple into the undercity below the temple. Anakin was fighting alongside Kenobi, trying not to kill their men, but it proved to no avail, some of them accidentally being clipped with deflection or worse. In the Great Hall, Windu and Yoda held off the clone assault, and in the back, Plo Koon ushered as many younglings away as he could. After believing the temple to be cleared, Yoda instructed the council to leave. Windu agreed, and then he noticed a small group of younglings pinned behind a pillar. One of the younglings' peers was stuck, and they didn't have a lightsaber to get him out. There were clones approaching and blasting away. Plo Koon came running back and saw the two Jedi, and then he called out to them. Plo was told that they would be right behind. He nodded his head and pushed both Skywalker, Kenobi, and the younglings to the exit and getting them out. Yoda and Mace were extremely tired. They could hear the clones following them into the temple. It looked like the end, not just for the Republic, but for the Jedi. They didn't have time to think of such. They had to envision a positive future. Yoda leapt over a pillar, and Windu deflected blaster shots back into the clones. To make sure Yoda was covered, Yoda was able to help the youngling get up. The group made their way for the exit, and as they got closer, a group of clones found them and surrounded them. They were already being chased, and now they were stuck. The clones held their blasters out, and Windu and Yoda stood at each other's backs, with the younglings between them. They could get out of this. They could escape, and these children could have a future. Of course, that was ideal, but not plausible. When Palpatine ordered the capital ship of the Separatist fleet to bombard the Jedi Temple, it would be done, killing all the clones in the temple: Yoda, Windu, Commander Cody, Commander Rex, and the remaining younglings. In the Undercity, Plo looked back when the first shots were fired, but he, Kenobi, and Skywalker were blown back by the blast the moment the temple exploded. He knew Windu and Yoda were gone the second it happened. The Jedi retreated into a mass exodus to the Undercity of Coruscant. People on the upper level would retreat down below as well into the disgusting lower levels in the city world. The siege of Coruscant wasn't long, and tragically for the clones on the upper level, their fight would continue. They were still with Order 66 in their mind, but they still had to fight the droid forces. It didn't prove to any avail, as they were thrown from their positioning in the upper levels down to the lower levels where the people were retreating. The Jedi down below would try to recover. They lost thousands of comrades, but still, just under 1,000 remained. There were a few council members who stood in the waning days of the Republic. Master Plo, the eldest, Kenobi, Skywalker, Fisto, Kohler, and Shaak Ti. The rest of them had died either in the temple during Order 66 or the war as the Separatists surrounded the Republic. It had been a terribly long year, and the smoke settled, and it seemed like there was no light left in the galaxy. The Jedi who were recovering lifted Plo Koon to be the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, and to join him, Kit Fisto would be the Master of the Order. It was simple, short-term resolution to the absolute travesty of the situation. The only reason for deciding on this is because the Jedi desperately needed a leader to bring them together, and Plo was the eldest member of the Order still alive, with the most experience too. His silence in the council chambers would have to change. He would have to be the voice of the Order, but not just the Order, a resistance. The people down here were terrified, shell-shocked, lost for words, and a lot of it. Families lost members, houses, pets, everything. Those who survived from the upper layer were unable to understand how it could all go so wrong. Many people wanted to blame the Jedi, others wanted to blame the Senate. The rest didn't know who to blame. Plo Koon walked amongst the people, taking care of them, just as he did his peers inside the Jedi Order. He and Fisto talked about their strategy while they were helping those around them. It was hard. Fisto suggested that maybe the clones were savable. Maybe they would be of assistance to the rebellion. But Plo, as much as he loved the clones, wasn't adamant on it. They were an unknown factor at the moment. Plo assumed that the clones would make their way down to the lower levels of the city after they realized that the fight was currently over. At the moment, their concern was to help the wounded, mend the hearts of the distraught, and inspire the future chances of recapturing the city and what had been lost. They would do that. While Plo and Fisto were trying to get themselves situated, Anakin went to visit Ahsoka. While she stayed away from the Order, she found herself home here on Coruscant. The Cortez sisters were just overjoyed to have her back with them in the garage. It was a place close to Anakin, but also away from the conflict. After the siege, Skywalker visited Ahsoka, and she couldn't resist the pull to rejoin Anakin and help fight back. For months, citizens would begin rebuilding. Republic vehicles and clones had made their way down to the lower levels, which meant civilians had access to weaponry. During this time, the clones would begin to slowly trickle down, sometimes in squads, sometimes in groups a little larger. The mass consensus is that after the fighting for so long, they never understood the meaning behind the orders they received. They didn't even come from the Senate, they came from a mysterious voice. All the clones who survived the attack on the Jedi regretted it, and when they came face to face with the Jedi, they couldn't help but feel terrible. Plo made amends with a few commanders who were still alive. One of the fortunate ones was Commander Bly, another one of them was Commander Wolf. They reported that since Coruscant was taken, there had been a tall, scary-looking structure built over the wreckage of the temple. It seemed like the CIS had no interest in governing the galaxy, rather ruling. Of course, the clones wouldn't know that it would be a possible Sith Lord. All they saw was a massive structure constructed. Plo knew the Jedi couldn't remain down here. They couldn't allow the Sith to take control over the galaxy. He and the clones, as they came down, rallied together civilians and Jedi alike. They started construction on the seeds of the galaxy's liberation. It would take months to complete, but when it was done, the unity between clones and Jedi again, and similarly the people they had served were now serving with them. It was a true resistance. Plo divided up the Jedi, leaving Master of the Order Kit Fisto to lead the ground assault, while he, Master Skywalker, Kenobi, Ahsoka, and Master Beck went to the massive structure and faced down the Sith Lord, who had seemingly taken over the planet. With everything started, the ramparts that held the Separatists off from breaching the lower levels were restocked, and a counter-assault was pushed. The people rose up, and in front of them, the clones and Jedi were together again, fighting back. Inside the massive structure, one could simply call it a castle. The 5 Jedi infiltrated. Inside the castle, there were thousands of Magna Guards. The Jedi couldn't waste their time or energy trying to get through these droids. With the help of Ahsoka, they were able to use the vents and back doors to get around the droids to avoid consistent engagements. Outside, the sounds of battle could be heard. The building shook, and the echoes of explosions ricocheted off the walls. Plo led his Jedi into the throne room, and when they got there, they were left with shock. Of course, Palpatine stood in front of them. He was cynical, but there was something else. Something that had Anakin's jaw drop. Next to the Sith Lord was his wife. She was alive? He didn't understand. But she looked more alive than the woman who was slain in front of him a year before. Anakin snapped back into the moment. He cared about Padme still. He was haunted by the nightmares consistently, but he was strong. In the years since her apparent death, he grew up. He accepted not everything could be controlled, and he got a grip on his own emotions. Something that was aided by Mace until his eventual death. Now Anakin was prepared. This was a great test for him, his final. If he didn't show his strength and his ability to control his emotions, then he would be lost to Palpatine. Plo took the front. On the other side of Palpatine's throne was Darth Maul. Kenobi tapped Ahsoka on the shoulder and the two of them moved over and looked at Maul. The Sith apprentice was beyond angered at the sight of 2 Jedi who evaded him. Sure, Ahsoka was no Jedi, but she was essentially a clone of Kenobi and Skywalker. Maul wanted to get both of them. Sidious knew Maul would go for Kenobi if he survived, but this lineup, in Palpatine's mind, wasn't a challenge for him. He ignited both of his lightsabers and the Jedi did the same, each Jedi igniting one of their own blades, and Ahsoka and Kelleran 2 of their blades. The battle began. Kenobi leading the assault on Maul with Ahsoka close behind him. Sidious leapt across the room. The 3 Jedi expecting it were prepared. In the years since his disappearance of Sidious, Skywalker grew exceptionally well, but by himself he would have struggled against the likes of Palpatine. The 3 Jedi quickly used each other to defend themselves, Plo taking on the majority of his hits coming from Palpatine. Master Plo used the same strategy that helped him edge out Yoda in a spar years prior. Sidious's speed was unmatched. Kelleran, using his 2 lightsabers, pushed against Sidious, but his quick actions were too much. The Dark Lord swiped down, beating Kelleran's attack, throwing an elbow into his face and slashing down, cutting off Kelleran's arm. Sidious used the Force to throw Kelleran from his feet. Behind Sidious, Maul and Kenobi got into an intense duel. The Sith assassin tried turning Kenobi to the dark side, telling him about relishing in the death of his old friend Satine. Ahsoka looked at Kenobi, sensing something deeper between Obi-Wan and Satine, but Obi-Wan was a true Jedi. He didn't let it break him. In his mind, he remembered hearing Satine's final words, and her gentle touch fading away in her final moments. It was sad, tragic, but it was enough of a reminder to him to never change who he was. Kenobi and Maul's duel was so personal, and Ahsoka could hardly get a hit in. Sidious flashed his blades around. Plo and Skywalker stood side by side. They were an uncommon duo, but they worked really well together. Plo, using his natural strength, was able to land a disarming hit against Sidious, but the Sith Lord was not yet done. He threw his blade forward. Skywalker was left open. Sidious had no intention of killing Skywalker upon his entrance, but his calm demeanor told him that he'd be harder to corrupt, and not for nothing, so would be the apparent execution of his wife. Anakin struck at Palpatine, but the Sith Lord used a block to parry, and Anakin's blade was thrown from his hand. Plo saw this. He had 2 choices, and he made the one he believed to be best for the future. Sliding himself between Anakin and Sidious's blade, the weapon struck true, landing in Plo's chest. Anakin was left with shock, but he couldn't be stuck looking at Plo. The Grand Master passed his blade backwards, and Anakin caught it in his left hand, grabbing Sidious's wrist with his metal hand and smacking Sidious in the jaw with his elbow, before swinging across, blasting the Sith Lord in the face with the lightsaber. Anakin turned around after making sure Sidious was dead. In his shock, Maul lost his concentration and Ahsoka drove her blades through his chest. Kenobi smiled at Ahsoka and they both turned over to see Anakin holding Plo's hand. Kylo Ren was on the ground, looking over the Chosen One and the fallen Grand Master. Plo used his strength to sit up as he put his arm around Anakin's back and brought him in closer, gripping Anakin's hand and telling him, "The future of the Jedi belongs to Skywalker." Plo lowered himself back to the ground, his breath shallowing out. Anakin held Plo's hand tighter. Kenobi and Ahsoka ran up behind him. Ahsoka got down to her knees next to Plo, and he turned his attention to her. She grabbed his hand in the short moment of peace. With the Sith extinguished, Plo Koon looked over their shoulders and saw a blue apparition, one that told him to come along. And when Plo took his last breath, his body vanished and his cloaks fell to the ground, taken into the Force by Master Qui-Gon Jinn. Anakin looked around confusedly. Obi-Wan ran over to make sure Kylo Ren was alright. He was. Anakin felt a surreal amount of pressure fall into his shoulders, but at the same time, it was peace. Ahsoka asked him what was said to him, and he told her that the future of the Jedi belonged to him. She looked at him inquisitively. Before she could ask a word, he rose to his feet like a man possessed and ran over to his wife. She had cufflinks locking her hands behind her back. She had bruises across her face and her eyes had bags under them. She looked as if she hadn't eaten in weeks. Padme looked up weakly. The lack of sleep left hallucinations to play hide and seek with her, for as long as she could remember. Seeing Anakin in her mind was just another hallucination coming to her rescue, only to be disappointed when the warm embrace disappeared into a fog. But this time, she felt his arms covering her flimsy body. He spoke to her, and his voice sounded like a peaceful ocean's embrace. It was all she could ask for in a simple moment, and when she realized it was real, she said his nickname quietly, but also cautiously, afraid it wasn't real. Though, when he wrapped her up, he heard Obi-Wan's cautious voice. Anakin turned his head and saw two children in small tanks being pushed over by Obi-Wan. They weren't newborns. Both of them were at least a year old. It all clicked, but at the same time it didn't. It would be revealed in the coming minutes that this was a cloning facility, something they didn't really know how to understand. As the battle intensified, the Jedi had to get out before the castle was taken down. The siege of Coruscant would last for months. It would be a terribly bloody conflict, and it would cost the lives of millions. But without a leader, with the Jedi destroying the super tactical droid, guerrilla warfare would strike down the Separatist war machine. Padme would be brought into a makeshift medical facility, and the two children would be taken care of and kept with her. They would all be healed and brought back into the best health possible. Though for Padme, the trauma of the past year would continue to haunt her. A rebellion would rise, inspired by the fight made by the people on Coruscant. Skywalker, now the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, would lead a sneak attack onto the Separatist capital, which would allow them to give out a shutdown command to all droids. It wouldn't be a total victory, but it would do the job. The Republic, incredibly fractured, would rebuild. It would take decades to climb back up to the level they were once at. But people around the galaxy, all horrified by what war could do, didn't want to see it ever happen again. Of course, the galaxy is filled with creatures that have short memories. But Anakin, with the Jedi Order rallied behind him, would move the Order to Dantooine and have his kids raised there with Padme. Of course, the Jedi being on Dantooine didn't mean they didn't or couldn't help the people in the galaxy. They actively went out to the galaxy to help those around them, especially being that the people were suffering. Anakin may have not been the youngest Grandmaster in history, but he stepped up to the plate when the mantle was passed down to him. A statue would be erected in the Hall of Dantooine to remember those who passed before and sacrificed themselves. This new order would be very similar to the one before it, but new virtues, rules being changed would inspire Ahsoka to rejoin said order. The galaxy would change, but without the Sith. It would be for the better, and while Padme had a lot of recovering to do mentally, she would be given a chance at a fresh start thanks to the help of the Jedi who rescued her. Luke and Leia would eventually grow into the pride of the Jedi Order when they were of age, each of them being trained by one of Anakin's closest friends, Leia with Obi-Wan and Luke with Ahsoka. Anakin would oversee, but in an effort to remove his own biases from their training, he encouraged the two of them to train them. This new Jedi Order would continue on for centuries, inspired by those who reinstated it, and those who restored the galaxy from evil. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our collaboration. Again, special thanks to Gallivant Gaming, Tristan, Darth Revan, Pimdaddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Jedi Sloth, Mad Matty Studios, Anakin003, Flynn Vassis, Lemon Knight, Rex the Wolf, the man with 3 first names, Dark Saint 46, Jack Miller, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Special thanks to the Star Wars Galaxies for joining me on this collaboration. If you want to see Sidious' perspective of the entire video, go check out their video. It is amazing. Otherwise, let's talk about our quick story real quick. This was fun. Collaborations are something that I think would be a lot more fun to keep doing, so expect to see them in the coming weeks, months, whatnot. This was fun though. Doing an entire perspective on one character allows me to flesh out the character a little bit more instead of focusing on both perspectives. So it allowed the Star Wars Galaxies to do a flesh out of Sidious and allowed me to do a flesh out of Anakin. And so the big reveal at the end of this is that Padme was actually alive, and that the clone was, or the person that was killed earlier was actually just a clone that Palpatine put together. But you wouldn't know that if you watched this perspective. And so if you watch his perspective, you get to see that, but you also miss out on what Anakin goes through. So similarly with what we did with Fantasy Folklore, we did here, and I hope you all enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to do these collaborations. It's a lot of fun to do collaborations in general. So if you want to see more, smash the like button. Don't forget to go check out the Star Wars Galaxies. Let's get them up to like 10,000 subs. Let's go do that. Anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.